update. So really, we have made it a long way as the conflict has started in Myanmar, as we know, in February 2021. And since then, we have tried to keep people informed about what has been happening in Myanmar. Unfortunately, it doesn't get too much attention this day while the conflict is still very much going on and people still continue to die. Now, we are very honored to have with us Debbie Stothard. We had her before and for a series of events and updates. And now we are glad to welcome her again after Kinomar was with us for 6 episodes. Normally we do series of 6 episodes with each of our resource person. And Debbie is the director and founder of ALTSEAN. As you know, she is a leading activist for Myanmar as well as for ASEAN or Southeast Asia more generally. So please, Debbie, as usual, oops, something is going on. Okay, so as usual, we will have about 20 minutes of presentation and then we open for question and answer. Please, Debbie.
Thank you, Leah, and thank you to team at SEAJunction. Hi, folks. It's great to be back. I have a PowerPoint, so I have something to occupy your eyes besides my face. Shall I share it or shall I wait for Lynn to share it?
You can share it if you want,
Okay.
unless you prefer otherwise. Yeah.
No, I'm going to. That means just let me let me just call it up. Hang on just a second. Okay. Here we go. All right, and let me. Okay, hang on. Sorry, let me just do this again. Sorry. Okay. Where is my yes. Okay, here we go. And I should. Do you see the?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
You just need to. Okay. Good.
All right. So, hi everybody. A lot of things happened in the past few weeks. So one of the things, of course, the military junta in Burma always likes to do, how do we say, now you see it down, now you don't, like a magic show, a sleight of hand. On the 31st of July, they declared that the state of emergency is over. Ha ha! Is this great news? No. The state of emergency that the military imposed on 1st of February 2021 to justify holding a coup, to try attempt the coup, they have been extending this state of emergency even beyond what was allowed in the military drafted constitution, the 2008 constitution. And then now, finally, they've lifted the state of emergency. And of course, they rebrand themselves from the State Administrative Council, the SAC, to the SSPC, State Security and Peace Commission, which they are now branding as an interim government until the sham elections are held. And of course, they are going to start voting when? During our Christmas holidays. December 28th, if I'm not mistaken. So I am canceling my Christmas holidays. But you can already see they are not planning to make this a smooth and peaceful and equitable and inclusive election. They've probably planned to have the voting during the peak holiday period. This is almost a global holiday period, at least for the United Nations and for most of the UN members and the UN officials who might have some care about what's going on, what's happening in Myanmar. So I think we can brace ourselves for the worst. Now, part of the so-called state of emergency being lifted is like, yay, state of emergency lifted. Boo, they actually slapped martial law on 63 townships. So if you look at this map, the map on the left, which is the orange parts, those are the zones, the townships where the military junta has imposed officially martial law. And if you look at the map on the right, you can see that this is where it corresponds, that it corresponds quite closely. It scarily corresponds with the areas that have received the heaviest airstrikes, drone attacks, and paramotor attacks. All these aerial attacks. So if you look at that map, the intensity where it's a darker color, where it's blue, purple, and a dark, like a brownish, those are the heaviest areas that have been targeted, where there's been the highest number of civilian fatalities due to aerial attacks in the past few years, since the coup was launched. So you can already see this is where the military doesn't have control. This is where the military is relying on aerial attacks to beat the local civilians and resistance into submission, and they really don't care how many civilians they kill there. So in areas where they are not likely to get any votes, they're basically killing the local people. And this is also telling us that we need to beware that these areas where martial law has been imposed will not just be places where there's no voting for the sham election, but also will be the places that the military will target for further attack. If that's not all, I mean, as of 8th August, there were at least 56,969 armed clashes and attacks against civilians since the 1st of February 2021. What does that mean? It means that there are now over 1,000 armed clashes and attacks targeting civilians a month. And as of 11th August, 3.3 million people have been displaced. So this is something that we need to be very aware of. And that's also partly why the ASEAN also refused to endorse the election. What they actually did was they tried to focus. Martial law has been imposed. Will not just be getting an echo. Okay, I'm getting out. Okay, so what that means is that ASEAN is still focusing on de-escalating the conflict, but they are not all ASEAN states want to denounce this election, this sham election, because some of them have a vested interest in trying to normalize relations with the military junta, whether or not the military junta is wearing uniform or business suit. Now, who's who in the SSPC, the State Peace and Security Commission? Well, so no surprise there. Coup leader Min Aung Hlaing is still in charge. He's acting president. So when the vice chair of the SAC is vice chair of the SSPC. Interestingly, Nyeong Saw, the former has been promoted as a normal member in the SAC junta to prime minister, and then we can see some people. Most of the SSPC are former SAC members, but also we have two newbies, Tun Tun Nai and Tan Sui, not Tan Shui. So he didn't come back. But it's Tan Sui who has been kind of elevated. So the thing is that the former SAC Secretary Ong Lin Dui got demoted to an ordinary member. He was previously the secretary. So and you can see in this table, all these lovely people, except for Yapie, have some kind of sanction by either the US, EU, Canada, or UK or US. So, or all of them. So now you know, well, we can't really have this as a business as usual because these are all pretty notorious people. And for many of us, we are seeing the SSPC is really a consolidation of the military, of hardliners, because most of these people, we've seen fewer civilians in the SSPC. The SAC previously had several civilian members, but now almost all the SSPC are either serving or retired military. So these are the people who didn't make the cut from the SAC to the SSPC, and we'll have more news on them later when we had a chance to analyze. Now, what was very interesting is that the SSPC has 29 ministries under the office, including 4 under the office of the Prime Minister, but it forgot to appoint an education minister. Well, so, and after there was a lot of online, even then, even when people are hesitant to express their opinions, even pro-military junta people were quite shocked to see there's no education minister, so they appointed Dr. Chocho Singh. So what we've seen in this rebranding and rebottling of the SAC into SSPC, State Administrative Council, to the State Peace and Security Commission, is that they basically merged or renamed some of the 34 old ministries under the SAC into 29 ministries under the SSPC. And the Ministry of Planning and Finance is replaced by the Ministry of Finance and Revenue. So we can see they don't plan, they just want to make money. And they've been a little bit honest about what they're calling themselves now. Now, all of this rebranding and reorganizing is supposed to put the military junta into a better position to conduct the sham elections, because you can't have elections during a state of emergency and this whole consolidation. So we actually saw what are the main preparation steps that that the junta has made. Well, firstly, they outlawed the parties that won 93% of the seats in 2020. They imposed martial law on places where they are not likely to win an election. And they imposed jail terms on those who oppose the election. And they're going to hold a phased votes at gunpoint. And they have these very mysterious electronic voting machines where the military staff, the juntas, workers have been trained and told to keep it a secret as to how it works. But I think there's a very clear sense that this is such a sham election. We can't even take this for seriously. So on the 28th of July, of course, the junta made a second amendment to the political parties registration law that will dissolve political parties accused of election fraud or so-called unlawful conduct. So it's very loose, the unlawful conduct part, but basically this is to absolutely ensure that the NLD cannot be re-registered as a legal party. They learned from the mistake they made, because in 2010, when the election was held by the then military junta, they put in a funny law which basically said the parties who want to run an election have to eject or disqualify, to kick out members who are serving jail term or serving detention, which meant that if the NLD wanted to run in the 2010 election, they were supposed to kick out Aung San Suu Kyi and a whole bunch of other leaders who were either under house arrest or detention. So, of course, the NLD did not participate. However, if you recall, in 2012, because the NLD was still a lawful political party, they were not deregistered, they were allowed to run in the 2012 by-elections. And that's where Aung San Suu Kyi won her seat, and the NLD made a significant comeback and further won the 2015 election by a landslide. So the Min Aung Hlaing and his goons are basically saying, oh, we learned from our lesson. We are just not going to let them even exist as a party. Now, that's not all. This is what's happening in Burma. What's happening in Myanmar is really like more dramatic than a K-drama, I have to tell you. On the 29th of July, the junta enacted the law on the prevention of disruption and interference with elections. Long-winded law. And what are the penalties if you break this law? Well, you can go to jail for 3 to 7 years for organizing against, protesting, or publishing criticism of the sham election. So what does that mean if you are media, or even if you're independent, ethnic, local-based media, if you are someone with an opinion on social media, if you are in international media making a commentary or analysis, if you might be, God forbid, an ASEAN official expressing concern about the sham election, you could be jailed for 3 to 5 years. Definitely, I think I will have to be jailed in Burma for several lifetimes to amend for all my terrible sins and crimes against this military junta. You could get 3 years to life in prison for disturbing, obstructing, or threatening candidates. And remember, the candidates earlier this year were already authorized to carry weapons to defend themselves. So if their aim is bad and you say, hey, you cheat, or you criminal, or you're participating in a sham election, you traitor to the cause, if their aim is bad and they can't shoot you, at least the military will kindly put you in jail for up to life. You also could suffer 3 years to life imprisonment for intimidating, threatening, or physically harming voters, polling staff, or election commission members. I don't know. I think I'm so tall and big. I guess just standing next to them might be intimidating. And you could be jailed to life in prison for damaging election infrastructure and equipment as a group. And that's not all. You could be subjected to the death penalty for anyone implicated in a death linked to election interference. So you can see this junta is really serious about elections and democracy. They're willing to kill you for it. I will share the link to our latest Coup Watch, which was just released yesterday. And we couldn't avoid being current. We did make a South Park reference in our poster, but in July, Trump sent a letter to Min Aung Hlaing, informing Min Aung Hlaing, notifying Min Aung Hlaing that Burma, Myanmar will be subjected to 40% tariffs. You know, he was trying to impose tariffs on basically every brown country in the world, and a few others. And instead of saying, Min Online saying, dude, what the F are you doing? Min Online said, oh, thank you so much for your letter because you recognize me. And then, can you please lift the sanctions? So Trump administration took several people off the sanctions, some of the cronies. But, you know, we really start to think, oh my God, what's the world coming to when you just think what it was coming to. The military junta also launched a whole bunch of airstrikes in Burma, and I think you saw from that map how bad the situation is. But what we saw is that they killed 22 people sheltering in a monastery in Sagaing region, and also 15 people in an NUG field hospital. And these are all war crimes. This is war crimes under the Geneva Convention. But you know, 28th of July, the junta must be having a really frenzied day because they enacted this law on the elections that imposed a death penalty, and then they enacted another so-called law which imposed another death penalty. So they were into death penalties are us. It was 28th of July was death penalties are us day for the junta. They enacted the Military Secrets Protection Law, which imposes a life sentence and death penalty. And it's supposed to prevent current and former military police and junta-linked militia from joining private security firms without Defense Ministry authorization. So if you want to join one of those, the Chinese and junta formed private security firms, you can't just jump ship. You actually need to get permission from the Defense Ministry. So no, we were speculating that a lot of police and military would definitely abandon the army and the police and join these private security firms because they would pay more, but and hopefully have an easier job conditions. But now we see that loophole has been sealed by this law. And such retired former and current and former security forces also cannot join armed groups that are not set up by the regime. So no defecting. So the law will also punish unauthorized disclosure of military secrets. And military secrets could even mean what is Min Online shoe size, because they don't actually limit or define what is considered a military secret. And it appears that the law is supposed to be aimed at defectors, because people who we've had many defectors from the military junta who just, even the military junta was so bad, people were just saying, okay, this is the limit, I'm leaving. And they would have been charged if they were arrested under the desertion law. But now you could see this new law will impose harsher penalties than the desertion law. So we can already start to see the junta is feeling very insecure that their own staff don't love them anymore, and they're willing to kill them if they leave. Now, yesterday was 25th of August, and I hope you remember it was Rohingya Genocide Remembrance Day, 8 days since the official genocide of the Rohingya. I will say official genocide because as far back as 2006, ALTSEAN produced a briefer analyzing the situation of the Rohingya and according to the provisions of the the Convention for the Prevention and Punishment of Genocide, also known as the Genocide Convention. And we were shocked when we realized that what was happening with the Rohingya as far back as 2006, which is 19 years ago. We called it a slow burning genocide. And then we had the official genocide in 2017. And I hope that everyone will be willing. It's not too late, even though yesterday was the Genocide Remembrance Day, to join the hashtag I Stand With Rohingya. We have here people from Benin, Kenya, South Africa, Auckland, and Paraguay expressing their solidarity. So it's not too late to at least go find Genocide Remembrance Day hashtag and share it, or hashtag I Stand With Rohingya and share it on your social media. What we're very proud is that the Rohingya Myanmar Collaborative Network, the Asia Pacific Partnership for Atrocity Prevention, and the Asia Pacific Center for Responsibility to Protect and ALTSEAN have produced a video called Resisting Hate, and that is really looking at the hate campaign targeting the Rohingya. Even after the genocide, we are seeing active hate campaigns in South Asia, India, Bangladesh, in especially still in Burma, in Malaysia and Indonesia, really inciting violence, hatred, and even pushing for their criminalize and supporting criminalization of Rohingya refugees. And this actually perpetuates and in many respects intensifies the impact of the genocide. So it's not all bad news. It also shares what some young Rohingya women are doing to resist this hate. So please don't hesitate to watch this film. It's 20 minutes. It's available on YouTube, or you can go to our social media. And it's free. It's free to watch. And finally, see you at the next Burma event. See you at the ASEAN Civil Society Conference, ASEAN People's Forum workshop, and definitely see you at the next What's Happening in Myanmar monthly update. I hope that keeps me within my 20 minutes. Thank you. Leah, you're muted.
As usual. Okay, so now I am back. Thank you for reminding me to unmute. And indeed, you are within your 20 minutes, more or less. And it was very detailed and interesting to know, indeed, also the personalities involved into this election and the responsibility, as well as the new law that have been introduced. So there is a question already which relates to the election about what is the reaction of NUG? What are the opposition groups doing? There is sometimes the feeling that they are not doing enough, or at the least not in a visible way. And the second question is, again, what are the strategies that groups, NGOs group, as well as NUG and others proposing to counter this election? And the last,
Actually, yes, sorry.
Okay,
Proposing
I
to
have
counter.
another one, different one. Maybe
Yeah.
you want to talk about this first then, because the other
Okay.
one is different topic. Yeah.
Look, even when the coup took place, when the coup started in February 2021, Mina Online already said, oh, we're going to have election. And then he said, oh, no, we're not going to have election yet until the security situation stabilized. So instead of stabilizing the security situation, the military became more aggressive and started to launch all kinds of airstrikes. And now they've diversified to include drone strikes and paramotor strikes. And paramotor strikes, I don't know, for people in the generation who used to watch Mad Max, it's like a two-person low-flying aircraft. It looks like a flying lawnmower. And so it can't fly very far, but because it's flying low, it can actually see the target and it's more accurate in the bombing. So someone is flying that, and you don't have to be a pilot. It's like using a lawnmower, literally. You don't have to be well trained to be able to operate a paramotor. And in fact, you can buy paramotors on Alibaba. You can actually buy it online. So it's not that expensive. So someone flies it and a passenger carries the bombs and throws the bomb at the people down underneath, beneath them. So we saw that instead of stabilizing the situation, the military became more aggressive and started to resort to artillery attack and aerial attacks. So and even China at those early stages told the Minang Line, don't hold it yet. And we had also talked about whether there had been behind the scenes talking about whether we should try to find ways to have elections using phone apps, an alternative election, and because I think the NUG being comprised of elected MPs from 2020 would have been perfectly within their legal rights. They would have probably more authority than the military junta to hold their election in 2025 this year. So I think, and ALTSEAN even drafted briefers on the sham election, or the expected sham election, and then the election got delayed and delayed and delayed, and people had to deal instead with the increased airstrikes, with sentencing people to death for the first time in history, decades, in of the country's history, in recent history, and the massive humanitarian disaster, the economic chaos, and all the natural disasters, including the earthquake in March this year. But even before the earthquake, we had a number of cyclones, Mocha, Yagi, a lot of different disasters that people were dealing with. So I think in many respects, the civil society, the human rights activists were actually focused on what was most urgent at the time. And a lot of us were doing a whole bunch of other projects, including, in ALTSEAN's case, the Inclusive Federal Economic Policy Project, which I'd love to talk about in the next monthly update. But also, every year they said, oh, we're going to have the election. And then it was like a false alarm. And I think now, finally, people understand that the junta is desperate. They have to hold the election if they want to have any kind of, even if it's a thin veneer of legitimacy. And they realize that no, they are heavily illegitimate, and they need to use the sham election as an off-ramp, a way to get different parts of the international community to normalize relations with them. So there has been a lot of strategizing and a lot of discussions behind the scenes. And I think in the next few weeks, people will be able to know what's going on. The things will go public. But I think also it's been very clear that the sham election has been consistently condemned even since the coup began in February 2021. And you will see it in a lot of joint statements. So it's not that we haven't been talking about it, strategizing about it, or even working against it. But it's also quite interesting to see that the latest laws, these imposing the death penalty and 3 years jail just for criticizing the election and so on, the military junta is really, really scared. They are really insecure about the sham election, because they know that even local people are laughing at them and don't believe in this sham election. So they're trying to actually make it so scary that nobody will dare criticize the, 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 the sham election, even to send people to jail for 3 to 5 years, etc., for very, very small things, very small actions or very small statements. So they really, really are insecure. They are going to go into this sham election with a lot of weaponry. They've even authorized and encouraged parties that they have registered and allowed to join the election to arm themselves. So it is a very dangerous time. And it is outrageous that some ASEAN members and some neighboring countries are just saying, oh, something is better than nothing. Let's have this election and see what happens next. It's the first step. But we're not going to fall for that trick again. This is what happened in 1990. This is what happened in 2010. This is what happened in 2020. How many times will the international community allow itself to be deceived?
Okay, so for the ASEAN member, I think the question is how to counter this, I mean, in the country that still believe or they may want to support the election, what strategy can be done? But there are other questions not related to the election. So one is what do you think about what is the reason for the military to close the Thai-Myanmar border? That is one question. And the second is, do you know that the military has banned buying some products from foreign countries? If you know what you think about this. I think the country, I mean, from the question, they say the products include soap, toothpaste, toothbrush, noodles, electric. So it seems there are a lot of products that have been banned from foreign country, and the reason is not clear. This is the question. Yeah.
Okay.
Good question.
Let me say a few things. One thing that happened is that a lot of activists have been alerting ASEAN governments and ASEAN decision makers for quite some time that the conflict figures are too high, and they have been highlighting and alerting that, you know, every time the military junta, for example, they're going to set up they have already set up private security firm joint venture with Chinese companies, the junta and Chinese companies. They've already authorized and legalized the use of weapons by people who are allowed, parties that are allowed to participate in the election. Every time we see the conflict stats going up, and you saw in the first map, the correlation between the martial law zones and where all the airstrikes are happening, where the main civilian fatalities are happening, you already see it's too strong and evident. So many decision makers in ASEAN countries that have not been hostile to the movement, who have been willing to listen, they understand that all the signs are bad for the de-escalation of conflict. And remember the failed 5-point consensus that ASEAN is desperately clinging on to. Their main metric is de-escalation of conflict. So it's been easier for some of these states to say, instead of saying we oppose election or it's a sham election, because nobody in ASEAN dare say it, because as you will observe, if you would have noticed, if you're a keen observer on free and fair elections, most of the elections happening in different ASEAN states have not been completely free and fair. So they don't want to say it's not free and fair because, you know, there's this saying, every finger that you point is three fingers pointing back at you. So they're not going to do that. But what they are trying to do is to say it's the conflict. Conflict has the de-escalation of conflict, reduction of conflict has to come first. So many of them are hiding behind that. Instead of criticizing the election or calling it unfair and unfair, they are actually talking about reducing the conflict. So I think that is the kind of diplomatic position that some of the states have been taking. So that, and we have to help people understand, you know, that the conflict is destabilizing in so many levels, this region. And you know, there was even a drone that crashed into Thai airspace last month. What the military trying to close the border? Military is trying to close the border because it's trying to stop people from going to Thailand. It's the department now, the new department, the new Ministry of Finance and Revenue is actually trying to stop the importation of goods that people will have to pay for. They don't want it. They want to stop imports because they are losing foreign exchange that way. They're trying to save all their foreign exchange to win a sham election, to buy more aviation fuel and more equipment to do more airstrikes and aerial attacks and artillery attacks. That's what they are trying to use, or they're trying to stop the outflow, the bleeding of foreign exchange. In fact, it's quite clear that in the first, pretty early on since the coup, a lot of business people, including cronies of the military themselves and the military families themselves, have been pushing their capital, pushing their savings to buy apartments in Singapore and Thailand. They try to keep their money outside because they know very well that the military junta is causing the economy to fail. And this is also why last month in July, the military imposed a new law on civil servants. Basically, if you are the immediate family of a civil servant, the spouse or the children of civil servant, and you want to go overseas, you need to apply for permission. So moving money or trying to leave the country, even the civil servants, their immediate family still have to get permission from a body which is supervised by Min Aung Hlaing's office. So that's how scary the situation is. They are freaking out about the loss of money. They don't want to lose foreign exchange. They are trying to find every excuse to stop imports and increase exports. So they have, and this is also another sign that a lot of the sanctions, a lot of the responses to the economic mismanagement, basically, I can't even call it economic mismanagement. It's basically economic thuggery that has been happening in Burma. These responses mean the military is losing revenue. That's why they need to stop money from leaving the country. So this is, and it's also kind of a, how to say, a face saving. Oh, if you sanction us, we'll sanction you. But in reality, these are like toothpaste and all of these items, toiletries and these items are basically things that if people afford, they would buy made in Thailand or made elsewhere, not made in Myanmar. In fact, many factories closed down. Myanmar's manufacturing base has been hurt because the factories don't even have regular electricity, right? The military has been if you are even in Rangoon, when you want to go from one part of Vietnam to another, you have to pass so many military checkpoints. So this kind of strangulation means you either buy things made in China or things made elsewhere. So the military is really, really trying to reduce the loss of foreign exchange. So I think this is something that we need to understand, but we also need to understand one more thing about refugees. The ASEAN has been doing something very, very nice. Thailand, Malaysia, they continue to deport Burmese people from Burma. They continue to criminalize asylum seekers and people fleeing the violence in Burma. Last month, it was reported that 162 Burmese nationals were deported to the junta from Ranong. Out of the 162 Burmese nationals deported to Ranong, 150 were forcibly conscripted into the army. So by criminalizing people from Burma and deporting them, Malaysia and Thailand, and maybe other countries as well, including India, are actually prolonging the conflict because they are allowing the military to conscript these people and send them to the front lines. There's already been 70,000 forced conscripts, people forcibly conscripted, sent into the front lines, and they are poorly trained and they're often used as cannon fodder. So they are sent to the front lines mainly to die and to build the ground for the professional military to make advances. So this is if ASEAN, if the region was was serious about reducing the conflict in Burma, they will not be pushing back people, especially people who could be possibly conscripted into the army. Unmute again. Sorry, Leah.
I always forget, but yes, so we still have 10 minutes, but already we have many questions actually related. One is on the refugee, although I think is can be easily explained because Thailand today gave permission to refugee to work. So the question is this, if this authorization now for refugees is a change of mind by the Thai authority, which I think is not the case because this concerns mostly the camp refugees. So it's a different group, but maybe you want to elaborate on this. Then the second question, again, back to the election, is about, do you think it will happen, considering that it has been announced that it will be only 100 townships out of the 300 township, and then one more, sorry. There is one more related to whether ASEAN, if it happens, if indeed it happens, will this provide ASEAN with the ground they are looking for interacting with Myanmar in a more constructive way, if it happens, yeah.
Okay, firstly, ASEAN hasn't totally cut off the military junta. Basically, what they did early on in the coup is to actually ban political representation of Myanmar at the ASEAN summit and the foreign ministers meeting. Actually, ASEAN defense ministers meeting, a whole bunch, economic ministers, all of them are still having
Human rights.
Yeah, including the AICHA, the human rights representative for the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights. The representative is from the junta. Okay, so they haven't completely cut off the junta. It's just at the two main meetings where many ASEAN dialogue partners from the West, EU, Canada, UK, US are present. But all the others, they are still turning up. So I think there are some ASEAN members who really want to normalize relations, and they love to have a terrible military junta in their club, because then they don't look as bad as that junta. It's kind of like, oh yeah, Vietnam has a terrible human rights record, but it's not as bad as the junta. Oh, Laos doesn't have that much civil and political freedom, but not as bad as Myanmar. So they like to have Myanmar in their group, and they want to be able to do business freely and work freely with the junta. So I think that for those groups, and also individual political leaders with economic interests and economic partnerships with the junta, it means their personal money. They want to normalize relations. So they might say, oh, this is a good sign, step by step, something is better than nothing, blah, blah, blah. But the reality is that if you're serious about human security in the region, you really need to pay attention to this. The authorization for refugees to work, the permission for refugees to work, there's more than 100,000 refugees in the Thai-Burmese border living in camps. And these camps mean they can't go in and out easily. And those camps are very cramped, so it's not like you can grow food to feed yourself. So earlier this year, the food ration for refugees in camps was 195 baht per person per month. And then it was halved, it was reduced to like about 87 or 90 baht per month per person. So I don't know what you can eat for on it. So it's like basically 1.5 baht a day for your food. And because of the Trump cuts, this became zero effective 31st of July. All during this time, for many years, there has been so much advocacy to allow refugees to work. And this urgency, now that there's no money at all, then the Thai authorities had to consider the situation. The problem is this: it is not clear whether the refugees will be allowed to leave their camp to work if they get a job offer, or whether they still have to treat the camp like a prison and they're only allowed for certain hours to work, which limits their options. And this is actually not a very refusing the refugees the right to work so they can feed themselves and contribute to the Thai economy is, if you don't do that, it's really irrational. Why? Because for the past 2 or 3 years, economists have been warning. Thai economists have been saying they have a labor shortage in construction, in agriculture, in hospitality, and other services. And in a few years' time, in 5 or 6 years' time, Thailand will be considered a super-aged society, namely the proportion of Thai population who are above age of 60, that means they will be of retirement age, is quite problematic because they don't have enough workers. And we already see when you have an aging population, you also have a need for care workers. So instead of importing migrant workers and having this lengthy and expensive process, many refugees already at least speak some basic Thai. They definitely can do work in agriculture and construction, but some of them have actually been accessing training and education, informal education. So they are ready to work. But if you are going to keep them stuck in the camp as though it's a prison, then you are also going to restrict the ability to contribute to Thai's development and to meet Thai's labor needs. So, and this is the reality. Economists will tell you, even in Malaysia and other places, if you allow refugees to work, they can take care of themselves. They don't need handouts. And also, normalizing refugees in the society means they will learn the local laws and abide by the laws. They will not be afraid of the authorities because they are legal. And if we have situation where refugees and undocumented migrants are forced to work very low wages with no social protection and no rights, then it's a pressure to reduce the labor rights of the citizens in that country. So I think there are very strong security and economic reasons to let refugees work freely uh, under a to legalize the refugees as workers instead of treating them like prisoners where they might only be allowed to leave the camp for a few hours to do some manual labor or casual labor, because that's not helping the Thai economy and that's not building sustainability for the refugees.
Maybe to add to what has been said, this is not the refugees or people who have run or flee Myanmar after the coup of 2025. We are talking of people who are in the camp for more than 30 years, of which half of them are below 18 years of age, born in Thailand soil. And
Yeah, their
okay.
experience has been of Thailand. That's why some of them can even
Yeah,
speak Thai.
yeah.
So
So
yeah,
just to be clear, because the question I think was misunderstanding the nature of this law of the change that we have to see in what it implies. And also I think it's important to know that some of them were going outside to work, but irregularly. So of course there was an whole economy, illegal economy, which was to basically to let them go out of the camp and then come back into the camp. So it is an important change, but we have still to see what and now indeed will be applied. Now the last question very quickly, the one you didn't answer yet, will it happen considering that Myanmar government military have said they will do it only 100 out of the 300? This is very quick, and then we close.
China is supporting them to do it, even if it's 50 townships. Even if it's 50 out of 330 townships, China will still support it. They want some semblance of legitimacy. And Min Aung Hlaing and his hardliners are also now desperate for some semblance of legitimacy because they see it as an opportunity to normalize economic relations, because they have driven this economy into the ground and they need revenue. And that's going to be one of the main motivations. Money and economics is going to be one of the main reasons the junta is trying to consolidate and legitimize its power, but also to actually get back all the money that they wasted killing people with bombs and bullets.
Well, a sad conclusion for this update, and we look to the next update to hear what is the implication for the area of Myanmar where there will be no election or where it's still possible to boycott the election. What will be the legitimacy there of an eventual government. But we will have to wait for 1 month. In the meantime, I thank our partner, Mizima and Irawadi, that cross broadcast our episode, and they have thousands of people that follow them, so much more than the few that SEAJunction has. So we are extremely grateful to both Mizima and Irawadi for supporting these updates. Thank you very much, Debbie, and I look forward to seeing you the next month for the next episode. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And don't forget to read our co-watch if you want more details about what we've been talking about. See you next time. Bye.
Will do. Bye-bye.